And what struck me also by it is the fact that there's a stone wall in ruins. And I thought, that would take a long time.
Yeah, the thorns and weeds could grow up pretty quick, but the stone wall is in ruins. It's probably a family of sluggards
Yeah, I mean,
passing down their bad habits through the generations. There's a great Tolkien quote from Lord of the Rings where Pippin actually says, "Shortcuts make long delays," which makes a lot of sense, especially what you just said, going out on your own.
mhm.
And you're like, well, here's this path that everybody uses, but I'm unique. So here I go, and I'm tangled in the hedge. Like
Yeah.
it's almost definitely gonna take longer, right? The reason that the road is there and well trodden is probably because 10,000 people before you found that to be the fastest way to get from A to B.
Welcome to Biblocus, where the Bible intersects with your life. I'm Timothy.
And I'm Caleb.
And you're listening to Bible Discussions, the forum where we explore biblical topics that are relevant to your life. Today we are finally finishing off our series on the extra bonus sayings of the wise from the book of Proverbs. And this is going to be the real end. We're not faking it this time. This is really the end. And hopefully you've been enjoying your holiday season. It's been, Christmas is probably past now when we're releasing this, and we're still headed towards New Year's. So this will be our last episode of the year when it releases. And so we just wish you and your family well.
Yeah. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas. All right, so this is the final episode, bonus saying number 5. The Field of a Sluggard. So there you go. That's a great title. So let's go ahead and read that. Proverbs 24, verses 30 through 34.
I went past the field of a sluggard, past the vineyard of someone who has no sense. Thorns had come up everywhere, the ground was covered with weeds, and the stone wall was in ruins. I applied my heart to what I observed, and learned a lesson from what I saw. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed man.
So I think that might be the best beginning we've ever had of any of the sayings, or maybe any piece of literature anywhere. Yeah. I went past the field of a sluggard, past the vineyard of someone who has no sense. Yeah. It's like that should be as famous as "It was a dark and stormy night." That's a great beginning.
Well, that's kind of, it stood out to me compared to most of the other sayings. It's in the first person, first of all, which some of them are. It'll say, I implore you, my son, to remember the sayings of your father or of your mother or whatever. But this one, it does that first person, and then it's like starts telling a story. I was walking down the road one day, and I looked over and saw that guy, and it's kind of like a parable, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And what struck me also by it is the fact that there's a stone wall in ruins, and I thought, that would take a long time.
Yeah, the thorns and weeds could grow up pretty quick, but the stone wall is in ruins. It's probably a family of sluggards.
Yeah,
passing down their bad habits through the generations.
If you go over to Middle Tennessee, there's still places where they're what they call slave walls, from the 19th century that are run through people's neighborhoods, and people preserve them and stuff. But those walls have been there for a couple hundred years almost,
Yeah.
And so depending on when they were built. So a stone wall is pretty durable. So this tells me that this person's life isn't just coming upon a short-term crisis of, I'm not getting my stuff done. This is somebody who doesn't get their stuff done ever, right? And maybe there was a generational thing where the previous generation did get their stuff done, right? That's where the stone wall came from. But now you've got a new generation inherited this wall, and they're not doing anything to keep it up.
Yeah. So the other thing I noticed about this proverb is that it sounds a lot like other proverbs. We kind of joked about the last saying that they were just stealing one of the 10 commandments and tacking it on to get an extra saying of the wise. This one's pretty much an amalgamation of a bunch of proverbs about sluggards, it feels like. So, for example, Proverbs 20 verse 4 says, "Sluggards do not plow in season, so at harvest time they look but find nothing."
Yeah, and I thought this one echoed the bonus saying 3 that we just had
Right.
two episodes ago about planting before you build your house. But in this case, it's a plant before you fall asleep or something.
Don't forget to plant at all. And that reminds me of failing to plant is planting to fail. Oh, wait, failing to plan is planning to fail. That's a famous saying, usually attributed to Ben Franklin, but it probably wasn't even original to him. Although I think he did put it in like the Silence Do Good letters or something.
Well, it's a good one to end on.
The saying of the wise, yeah.
Yeah. We've been saying all along that the main theme of the sayings of the wise is long-term thinking, and this guy's not thinking long-term.
Right. And I mean, you could almost say that's the theme of Proverbs, probably, as we're going to see. We're going to look at a couple more about sluggards and so forth. It kind of is don't sacrifice the long term for short term gain. That makes no sense. It's a proper sacrifice is the opposite. You sacrifice the short term for a long term gain.
Yeah. So another example would be Proverbs 6 verses 6 through 11. It says, "Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest. How long will you lie there, you sluggard? When will you get up from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a thief and scarcity like an armed man."
Yeah, those last two sayings, or those last two verses there, they just straight up plagiarized for this saying. We talked about these extra sayings were probably not put there by Solomon, right? It's likely added by
It looks that way, yeah.
A scribe later, possibly. So maybe if Solomon had been the one to add them, he would have remembered that he already wrote that. But I don't know. The sayings were a little repetitive sometimes. So, yeah. So I mean, go to the ant. That's a famous line, right? People talk about busy bees or busy ants. And we all know the fable about the ant and the grasshopper, right? The grasshopper plays all summer while the ant is working, storing food. And then in the winter, the ants have food and the grasshopper has nothing. And that's interesting to think about because, Solomon, every time he uses the word sluggard, he's not just necessarily talking about someone who's completely inactive, right? And we'll see that especially in some of the verses to come here. But right, grasshoppers, you don't think of them as inactive. It's in the name; they hop. And a sluggard could be doing something, right? Today, it might be like he plays a lot of video games or something, or you go to parties a lot, or whatever the case may be. But if none of that is work, none of that is constructive, well, you're still a sluggard, even though you might be technically very active.
Yeah.
And that activity is just short term. It's just interested in play or in short term interests. But when the winter comes, right, you haven't prepared for it.
Right. Which leads us to our next proverb, which is Proverbs 15:19. "The way of the sluggard is blocked with thorns, but the path of the upright is a highway."
Yeah, and once again, it's not that the sluggard isn't necessarily doing anything. They're both on a path, right? And inevitably, if you want to think about your life as the metaphor here, right? We're all on a path, or going back to the seasonal imagery with the grasshopper, right? Winter's going to come for all of us, right? At the end of the life, what have you done to prepare for that? And the path that the sluggard chooses always makes it harder on himself. Like he's always getting in his own way.
Yeah. Or he does it so seldom that he isn't clearing it out. Like,
yeah.
The idea with this, the path of the upright is a highway. It's like, well, you're consistent. You do the things all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. A well-trodden path doesn't get overgrown because people just stamp everything down.
Yeah.
And this reminds me of a great Tolkien quote.
Well, which actually makes me that's a community concept too, because that means other people, you're doing things the way that everybody else does. But
with tradition and yeah. There's a great Tolkien quote from Lord of the Rings where Pippin actually says, "Shortcuts make long delays," which makes a lot of sense, especially what you just said, going out on your own. You're like, well, here's this path that everybody uses, but I'm unique. So here I go, and I'm tangled in the hedge. Like
Yeah.
it's almost definitely gonna take longer, right? The
Yeah.
reason that the road is there and well trodden is probably because 10,000 people before you found that to be the fastest way to get from A to B. Um, and of course, if you've seen the Lord of the Rings movies, you'll be shocked that anything wise came out of Pippin's mouth in the books. But again, the common thread here, like with all the sayings, is that the foolish are not thinking ahead.
Yeah. Right.
And especially, as I mentioned there, if you think about your life in general, your life as the path or as the year, and what comes at the end, right? That's the real application for this, the spiritual application for this. And Jesus talks about that a lot especially in Matthew 24 and 25. We'll read a few portions of that here, break them down. So in Matthew 24, verses 45 through 51.
Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. Truly, I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, my master is staying away a long time. And he then begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him and at an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Yeah, and this sounds, I think it's inescapable here. Jesus is targeting the apostolic ministry, specifically the leaders of the church, right? Because he's talking about servants who are put over other servants, right? And but of course it applies in a lot of other contexts as well. But what does it say there? Verse 48, where he says to himself, "My master is staying away a long time," right? And you just like. No one knows the day or the hour, right? You don't know when your life will end or if God comes back tomorrow. And so that again shows not necessarily a total inactivity, but the mindset of the sluggard is like just put it off till tomorrow. I'll change tomorrow. I'll do better tomorrow. I'll start improving myself tomorrow, and I'll take care of my responsibilities tomorrow. Like, what if there is no tomorrow?
Yeah, and this person is also taking advantage of that responsibility too. Maybe in lazy ways. I mean,
the authority.
When you're in power, then being lazy is like taking advantage of your power instead of doing things.
Yeah, and so it's a warning, not right if you've been given authority, not to take advantage of that as well. And so immediately after those verses, that was the end of Matthew 24. So this is Matthew 25, 1 through 13. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps but did not take any oil with them. The wise ones, however, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight, the cry rang out, "Here's the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for both us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." But while they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the others also came. "Lord, Lord," they said, "open the door for us." But he replied, "Truly, I tell you, I don't know you. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour." Right? What was that? One of the Proverbs said, "Sluggards do not plow in season," or apparently bring enough oil. And right, what happens to them in the parable here? They fall asleep. I mean, that's often biblical language, especially in the New Testament. Paul says that, right? That's when when a faithful person dies, they've fallen asleep. All the virgins fall asleep waiting on the bridegroom, right? And so, like, they were waiting on him to come, thinking it would be short. And that's always interesting. One thing this always makes me think about is like people who are predicting the end times, and trying to, telling a bunch of poor people who listen to him, "Oh, sell all your stuff because he's coming on, whatever date, April 12th or whatever, because of numbers I found in the Bible. and they're thinking, well, he's got to come now. And well, we don't know that either. Like he tells us, act as if it's going to be soon. But for all the Christians who have existed so far in history, they fell asleep before he came back. And so if you don't, if you just have that short term mindset, right? Like I can figure out when it'll be, and I know exactly how long, and that's not what's given to us in Scripture. That's not what Christ tells us. He doesn't know. The Son doesn't know the day or the hour. And you're thinking like a sluggard there. So either way you look at it, if you're like, oh, I know when he's coming, or he's staying away a long time, like either way, you end up disappointed because you're not prepared for his coming in both cases. In the one, you're not trusting him to have his own timing to it, and in the one, you just think you've got all the time in the world.
Yeah. I was just going to add, I love this parable, and it's relational. See, it's not. That's the thing, is the people who are screwing it up aren't thinking relationally. Like they're focused on how much oil they have, and some people are better at that than other people are, and that differentiates them and whatever. But what really differentiates you is whether you care about the relationship or not. And it may be that these 5 went out and got extra oil because they really love the bridegroom, and they didn't want to miss out when he arrived.
Well, it's all,
right? And
yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's really important too to remember that Christ is still present with us. He says that. He promises that he will be. Right? So if you're thinking like, oh, I got to be ready for him whenever he comes back because he's not here.
Yeah.
That's incorrect. He is here.
But in the
you have a relationship with him and with his bride, his body, the church. That's what you should be focused on right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. But in the terms of the story, though, like they're waiting on somebody.
Yes.
Right? And so what the flaw of the 5 foolish women is too, that they run out of oil. Well, actually, they don't ever run out. They're running low.
They're about to run out.
Yeah. But they don't want to see the bridegroom as much as they want to go make sure they have this oil. It's kind of like a self-righteousness kind of thing.
Because they want to, it'd be embarrassing if I'm the only one whose lamp burns out.
Yeah, So why not just stay there at that point and say, well, I didn't want to miss you. I knew you were imminent, and so I didn't want to miss out on it, so I stayed and I ran out of oil. I mean, I think everything we know about God, he would have been like, yeah, that's cool. That's all right.
Yeah. And so again, like the sluggards don't plow in season, and when it comes to harvest time, they look and find nothing. And you don't want to be on the last day. Like if when we stand before God, are we going to look but find nothing? Like I waited for you the whole time. It's like I was there. I was working through my church, through my spirit. And what were you doing? Like off calculating how many years are in a random prophecy, and then deciding to add that to whatever year you happened to be in, and figure out. Or were you just slacking off because you figured you had forever? You didn't know when your death would come upon you. And it goes back to there's these 2 types of people, right? Both have lamps in this parable. Both have a field, right, or a path to walk, like in the proverb,
right?
But one is more diligent with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so continuing on in Matthew 25, next is actually the parable of the talents. We won't read that, although you can. I would encourage you. It's pretty much consistent with what we've been looking at here. We had to stop before we read the whole book of Matthew. So after the parable of the talents, still in Matthew 25, verses 31 through 46.
When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? The king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it for me. Then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me. They also will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you? He will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life.
Yeah, so whether we're talking about leaders or followers, like that earlier parable seemed pretty clearly to talk about people in positions of authority, or whether it's clergy or lay people in the church, right? The focus here is on being a servant, right? Remember in the earlier parable, it's a servant in charge of the servants, right? And in this case, it's all about what are you doing for others? So having a servant heart, like a sluggard, certainly, right? Like we said, he might find something to busy himself with, but it's going to be self-serving. It's going to be pleasure or entertainment or whatever he's distracting himself with, right? But as Jesus said, the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. That's what he modeled, and it's what he calls us to do. And again, here you see this attitude of like, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or blah blah blah? When did we see you? You haven't been here. You were gone, right? And again, no, he's not. He promised to be with us always, and this is one of the ways that he's with us is in service.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So Solomon certainly has a lot to say about sluggards in Proverbs, right? We've only scratched the surface of it. There's a great verse in chapter 21 of Proverbs about the craving of a sluggard, right? And again, if somebody's craving something, they might look pretty active because they're trying to get it, Or I've quoted before, burying the hand in the dish, right? But being too lazy to bring it back, which happens twice in Proverbs. But I think there's one here that best sums up the difference between these two different types of people that we've seen. So Proverbs 13, verse 4 says, a sluggard's appetite is never filled, but the desires of the diligent are fully satisfied. And that's interesting. We've got again, there's two people, they're both on a path, they both have a field, they both have lamps, whatever the analogy is, right? They've both got desires. And in the sluggard, because his desire is completely to serve himself, right? As Paul says, their stomach is their God, right? He's never going to be filled. But the diligent, as Solomon calls them here, the diligent, or we could say the righteous, right? The godly, their desires are fully satisfied. And we always like to end in Revelation when we can. And I know we've ended with this verse before, talking about kind of a similar concept in the past, but in Revelation 22:17, which has got to be one of my favorite verses.
The Spirit and the bride say, come. And let the one who hears say, come. Let the one who is thirsty come. And let the one who wishes take the free gift of the water of life.
I love that verse because it's just the promise of just the free giving, right, of the water of life, right, which Jesus talks about. Whoever drinks from his well will never thirst again. And it's just the opposite of the sluggard, right? The sluggard is concerned with short term, and what's our theme been for the sayings, right? So our final wise words takeaway, for real this time, is be disciplined, diligent, and selfless, and God will reward you.
Yeah.
And that you could pretty well sum up all of the sayings of the wise like that, right? I mean, most of them fall under that. We have ones that specifically talk about discipline, right?
Right.
Or that talk about, like moving boundary stones or cheating or
Well,
being selfish. So if you're doing the opposite of that, right?
whenever you think of diligence, right, you always think of Colossians 3:23 and 24, which says, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. And that pretty much says the same thing as the takeaway there, is that, when you're diligent, you'll get rewarded.
Yeah, because even if you're working for yourself, right, that would be a human master. That's the human you know the best. And he doesn't deserve all that sacrifice and service. But even other people, right? Like I think about when Paul says, no one would die for an unrighteous man, although maybe for a good man you'd be willing to die. And it's kind of like that. Like, you really want to be serving human masters? Like, the option is available to serve Christ.
Right.
So why not go and be around people who not only will help you learn how to do that, but by being around them, they're going to be looking for ways they can serve you.
Yeah. Yeah, I always thought that, the passage where Peter won't let Jesus wash his feet, and then Jesus says, well, if I don't wash your feet, I don't have anything to do with you. And he says, well, wash my whole body.
Yeah.
But I always think about that, if we're willing to do stuff for other people, right, we need to be willing to let other people do stuff for us.
That's true. There's like a false humility sometimes.
Yeah.
Like we'll refuse a gift or a blessing or a compliment.
And when everybody's taking care of each other, then everybody's needs are met, and you aren't actually, like striving to get your own stuff, because other people are serving you already. And that kind of community is called
a church.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what it should be.
That's what communion, that's true communion, when we take care of each other's needs around us. So
if we, our takeaway, we had our takeaway for this episode, but we always end the series with like an overall takeaway, right? And we've said it a million times already, but our big takeaway for the sayings of the wise and the further sayings is think long term.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get any more long term than Revelation 22, right?
That we read a minute ago.
That promise of the free water of life.
So that pretty much wraps up the sayings of the wise. And remember, our new series starting next episode is going to be the life of Christ. So
start with the new year, won't it?
Yeah, starting the new year with the new life. So he's Caleb and I'm Timothy, and thank you for listening to Bible Discussions on Biblocus, where the Bible intersects with your life. Please consider subscribing to our channel to help support our efforts. All scripture quotations, unless otherwise indicated, are taken from the Holy Bible, New International Version, NIV, copyright by Biblica Inc., used by permission of Zondervan, all rights reserved. Biblocus is a registered trademark. This program is copyright 2025 by Timothy Klingerman. God bless all of you.